This 4-year-old homeless girl sees a millionaire falling from a 500-foot building, but she was a genius, and with her drone, she does something no one expected. Comment what you thought of this story by giving it a rating from 0 to 10. I really want to know if you liked my story, and please subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The buzz of the improvised motor cut through the hot afternoon air of Harmony Creek. Sophia Miller, just 4 years old, carefully held her small handmade drone, built from plastic bottle caps, stripped wires from old appliances, and a flashlight battery she had found in the junkyard near her home. Her brown eyes gleamed with concentration as she manipulated the rudimentary controls she had soldered herself with an adapted clothes iron. The girl walked barefoot through the cobblestone streets of downtown, observing the movement of workers leaving commercial buildings. Her worn dress, which had once belonged to an older cousin, was stained with grease from her latest experiments at home. Sophia didn't care about appearances. Her mind was always occupied with new ideas, new projects born from necessity and infinite curiosity. In the front pocket of her dress, she carried a few screws she had collected that morning, along with small electronic components salvaged from broken radios. For her, those objects were precious treasures, pieces of a giant puzzle that only she could see. While other children her age played with dolls or cars, Sophia took apart appliances and rebuilt them with completely different functions. Davison Tower stood imposingly on the main corner, its 12 stories contrasting with the lower buildings around it. Sophia had passed by there many times, always admiring the structure and imagining what it would be like to design something so grand. That afternoon, however, something different caught her attention. Through the window of the top floor, she could see two men arguing heatedly. Henry Davison, owner of the construction company that bore his name, held a briefcase full of documents, gesticulating nervously in front of Victor Morales, his partner of more than 15 years. The 52-year-old man looked exhausted, with deep dark circles marking his tanned face. He had discovered something that had kept him awake for weeks, evidence that Victor had inflated the costs of several public works in the city, embezzling millions of dollars from city coffers. "You can't do this to me, Henry!" Victor shouted, his face red with anger. "We've been partners for years. Think about your family, your reputation." "I thought about my family when I discovered you were stealing money earmarked for the city's schools and health clinics," Henry replied, his voice trembling but firm. "I won't be an accomplice to this scheme for another day." Down below, Sophia adjusted the controls of her drone, making it fly in circles as she observed the movement on the roof. Her sharp mind picked up the tension emanating from the situation, even if she didn't fully understand what was happening. There was something in her childlike intuition that warned her of imminent danger. The argument on the top floor intensified when Henry threatened to hand the evidence over to the authorities. Victor, desperate, felt his entire life of luxury and privilege was about to crumble. In a moment of blind rage, he lunged at his partner, pushing him forcefully against the rooftop's protective wall. The world seemed to slow down as Henry lost his balance. Sophia, with her eyes trained to observe details, saw the exact moment the man went over the barrier and began to fall. Her brain processed the situation in fractions of a second, calculating angles, speed, and fall time with a precision that defied her young age. Without hesitation, the girl activated a special function she had installed on her drone only 2 days earlier. The small device automatically positioned itself below the fall trajectory, while Sophia pressed a specific sequence of buttons. A compartment opened on the underside of the drone, releasing an inflatable net made of welded plastic bags and industrial tape. The net quickly expanded, forming a flexible surface that partially cushioned Henry's impact. The man hit the improvised air cushion, significantly reducing his fall speed before rolling onto the hood of a car parked near the sidewalk. The thud of crumpled metal echoed down the street, causing several people to rush towards the accident. Sophia remained motionless for a few moments, processing what had just happened. Her small invention had actually worked, saving a human life. Her hands trembled slightly as she retrieved the drone, which had landed a few feet away, with the net still partially inflated. Henry was conscious, but clearly injured. Blood dripped from a cut on his forehead, and he groaned in pain as he tried to move. His confused eyes searched around until they found the small figure of the girl approaching shyly, holding the strange flying object. Was "Was it you who saved me?" he asked in a weak voice, trying to focus his gaze on the child. Sophia nodded silently, her large brown eyes reflecting a mixture of concern and scientific curiosity. She knelt beside the injured man, examining his wounds with the same attention she dedicated to her inventions. "You're hurt, sir," she said, in her sweet but firm voice. "You need to go to the hospital. Your head is bleeding badly." The people who gathered around the accident looked admiringly at the girl and her handmade drone. No one could understand how such a small child had built a device capable of saving a life, let alone how she had the reflexes necessary to activate it at the exact moment. While waiting for the ambulance to arrive, Henry kept his eyes fixed on Sophia, trying to process the miracle he had just witnessed. There was something about that child that deeply intrigued him, an intelligence that shone through her childlike eyes and manifested in the ingenuity of her inventions. Up on the building's roof, Victor watched the scene with growing despair. Henry had survived, which meant his secret was still at risk of being exposed. His hands were clammy as he calculated his next moves, knowing he would need to act quickly to silence his partner before it was too late. The ambulance arrived in a few minutes, and paramedics began to attend to Henry with professional efficiency. Sophia stepped back slightly but remained close, observing every movement of the rescuers with scientific fascination. Her mind was already working on improvements for her rescue system, thinking about how to make it more efficient for future emergencies. "What's your name, dear?" asked one of the nurses, noticing the girl's interest. "Sophia Miller," she replied, carefully placing the drone in a cloth bag she carried over her shoulder. "Can I go with him to the hospital? I want to make sure he'll be okay." The nurse smiled at the child's genuine concern. "Do you live nearby? Where are your parents?" "I live with my grandma Martha," Sophia explained, pointing to the cluster of simple houses that stretched beyond the commercial area. "She's at home, resting. She's not feeling too well." Henry, even amidst the pain, caught the information and felt a pang of concern for the girl's situation. There was something about this extraordinary child that awakened a protective instinct in him that had long been dormant. As he was placed on the stretcher, he gently held Sophia's small hand. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "You saved my life. I'll never forget it." Sophia nodded seriously, as if saving lives was just another function of her inventions. "Everyone deserves to be helped," she said simply, demonstrating a wisdom that contrasted with her young age. As the ambulance drove away with Henry, Sophia began to walk back home, her mind already elaborating plans to improve her rescue system. She didn't know that this casual encounter would completely change the course of her life, nor that the man she had just saved held deep connections to her own past, secrets that would soon come to light in a devastating way. Sophia's house was at the end of a dirt road, among other simple constructions that formed the Oakwood Heights community. The wooden and masonry structure had been built by the girl's grandfather years earlier, with his own hands and the help of neighbors. 2 small windows faced the main street, and a faded blue door completed the modest facade. Martha Miller was sitting in the old armchair in the living room when she heard her granddaughter's footsteps on the porch. At 78, the woman carried the marks of a life of hard work on her body, but her eyes still shone with the same vivacity she had passed on to little Sophia. Lately, however, a persistent cough and chest pains left her increasingly frail. "Grandma, something very strange happened. Today," Sophia said, entering the house and carefully placing her drone in a shoebox where she kept her most delicate inventions. "What was it, my flower?" Martha asked, trying to hide a fit of coughing that seized her. Sophia related in detail the incident downtown, describing how she had saved the man who fell from the building. Martha listened with growing concern, knowing that her granddaughter had a tendency to get involved in dangerous situations driven by her insatiable curiosity. "Sophia, you need to be more careful," the grandmother said, pulling the girl close. "Not everyone understands your inventions, and some might want to hurt you because of them." "But I just want to help people, Grandma," Sophia protested, snuggling into the woman's lap. "Didn't my mom do the same thing? You always said she was very smart." Martha's heart ached at the mention of Isabel. For 5 years, she had kept the secret about her daughter's whereabouts, telling Sophia that her mother had gone to heaven when she was still a baby. The truth was much more complicated and dangerous for a child to comprehend. "Your mother was truly special," Martha said, stroking her granddaughter's curly hair, but sometimes being too smart can bring trouble. Meanwhile, at City General Hospital, Henry Davison was being examined by doctors. In addition to a few fractured ribs and superficial cuts, he had suffered a mild concussion. The attending physician, Dr. Alan Carter, reassured him that he would make a full recovery in a few weeks. "Mr. Davison, you were very lucky," the doctor commented, reviewing the exams. "A fall from that height could have been fatal. How did you escape practically unharmed?" Henry thought of the girl and her extraordinary drone, but he knew no one would believe the story. "It was a miracle," he said simply, deciding to keep the details to himself. Victor Morales appeared in the hospital room an hour later, playing the role of the concerned partner in front of the medical staff. His face wore a convincing mask of worry, but his eyes revealed a calculating coldness that Henry knew well. "Henry, my friend, what a terrible fright," Victor said, approaching the bed. "What happened up there? You just disappeared in front of me." "I slipped," Henry lied, deciding not to confront Victor in the presence of others. "I was distracted by the documents and lost my balance." Victor nodded, relieved that Henry didn't mention the push. "Thank goodness it wasn't anything more serious. The company needs you, especially now with so many projects underway." When they were alone, the atmosphere in the room changed dramatically. Victor closed the door and approached the bed with a menacing expression that contrasted with his earlier performance. "Henry, I hope this fall has made you reconsider your intentions," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "It would be a shame if something worse happened to you, or to people close to you. Are you threatening me?" Henry asked, trying to sit up in bed despite the pain. "I'm reminding you that we have a lot to lose if you make rash decisions," Victor replied. "And don't forget that I know some of your secrets too, like that situation with the engineer Isabel 5 years ago." The name Isabel hit Henry like a punch to the gut. He had tried for years to forget what had happened to the brilliant engineer who worked at his company, but guilt always haunted him during sleepless nights. "Isabel has nothing to do with this," Henry said, his voice trembling. "She does, actually. She discovered the same things you did, didn't she? And look what happened to her," Victor said with a cruel smile. "Disappeared from the city overnight, abandoned her little daughter. Very strange for such a dedicated mother, don't you think?" Henry closed his eyes, recalling Isabel's last days at the company. She had tried to talk to him about irregularities in the construction of the City Children's Hospital, but he was too busy with personal problems to give her due attention. When he finally decided to investigate her accusations, Isabel had already disappeared, leaving only a cold, formal resignation letter. "What did you do to her?" Henry asked, opening his eyes and staring at Victor. "I didn't do anything," Victor replied, but his smile suggested otherwise. "Isabel simply understood it would be better to start a new life far from here. Some people are smarter than others." At that moment, the room door opened, and a nurse entered to check Henry's vital signs. Victor immediately resumed playing the role of the concerned partner, bidding farewell with false words of affection and promising to return the next day. When Victor left the hospital, he went directly to the underground parking lot, where he made a call to a number he kept saved on a secondary cell phone. "It's Victor," he said when the call was answered. "We have a problem. Henry is more stubborn than I imagined, and something happened today that could complicate our situation." "What kind of complication?" asked a gruff voice on the other end of the line. "A girl witnessed the incident. She was on the street when Henry fell. I don't know exactly what she saw, but it could be dangerous." "How old is she?" "She must be about 4. Dark-skinned, curly hair, seems to be from a poor family. She said she lives with her grandmother in Oakwood Heights." "Kids are easy to intimidate," the voice said. "I'll send some men to pay them a visit, just to make sure she won't tell any stories." "Be discreet," Victor warned. "We don't want to draw unnecessary attention." Meanwhile, in Oakwood Heights, Sophia had locked herself in her small improvised lab in the back of the house. The 2-square-meter space was her personal sanctuary, where she disassembled old appliances and created her inventions. The walls were covered with pencil-drawn diagrams showing complex circuits that defied any logic for a 4-year-old. That afternoon, she was working on a new project inspired by the morning's incident. She had realized that her rescue system could be improved, and her mind was buzzing with ideas to make it more efficient. Using components salvaged from an old radio and wires from a broken blender, she carefully soldered a new circuit. "Sophia, come for dinner," Martha called from the kitchen. The girl put away her improvised tools and went to the kitchen, where her grandmother had prepared rice, beans, and a fried egg. The family's standard meal for months, since Martha's retirement had become insufficient to afford a more varied diet. "Grandma, did you know it's possible to create electricity using just lemons and coins?" Sophia asked as she ate. "No, my flower. How did you learn that?" "I read it in an old magazine I found in the junkyard. I want to try it tomorrow," Sophia said, her eyes shining with excitement. Martha smiled, admiring her granddaughter's insatiable curiosity. She sometimes wondered where so much intelligence came from, though she knew Isabel had also shown early signs of genius as a child. After dinner, as Sophia played in the small backyard, 3 men approached the street. They wore simple clothes, but there was something in their movements that suggested less innocent purposes. They observed the house for a few minutes, noting details about the structure and the family's movements. One of them, a thin man with a scar on his face, signaled to his companions. "This is the place," he said. "The girl you saw matches the description." "What are we going to do?" asked another. "For now, just observe. Tomorrow we'll come back for a little chat with the family. Nothing too aggressive, just enough to make sure they understand the importance of silence." Sophia, who was testing a small weather vane she had built, felt a strange sensation of being watched. She turned towards the street, but the men had already moved away, blending into the dusk's shadows. Even so, something in her childish instinct warned her of imminent danger, though she didn't know exactly what it was. That night, as Oakwood Heights fell silent, Sophia took a long time to fall asleep. Her mind continued to process the day's events, especially the encounter with the man she had saved. There was something in those wounded eyes that intrigued her, a sadness that went beyond physical injuries. She didn't know that. A few miles away, Henry was also awake, mentally replaying Victor's threats and wondering what terrible fate had befallen Isabel Miller 5 years earlier. The next morning brought a humid Texas summer heat. Sophia woke before dawn, as was her custom, and headed to the backyard to watch the sunrise. She had discovered that the morning light offered the perfect illumination for her solar energy experiments, a concept she had learned by disassembling a broken calculator found in the street. Martha was still sleeping deeply when the girl began her experiments with the lemons and coins she had set aside the night before. Following the instructions from the magazine found in the junkyard, she stuck copper coins and zinc nails into the lemons, connecting them with thin wires she had removed from a damaged phone charger. "It will work. It will work," she murmured to herself, checking each connection with the precision of an experienced engineer. When she connected the last wire, a small red LED she had saved from an old radio began to flicker faintly. Sophia let out a muffled cry of joy, covering her mouth so as not to wake her grandmother. Her first organic battery was working perfectly. On the other side of the city, Henry had had a terrible night. The pain from his fractured ribs was secondary compared to the anguish that Victor's words had awakened. During the sleepless hours, fragments of memories about Isabel came back to his mind with painful clarity. He remembered how she used to come to the office early, always carrying a briefcase full of blueprints and structural calculations. Isabel Miller was the only female engineer at the company at the time, a dark-skinned, determined woman who had managed to stand out in a predominantly male environment through pure technical competence. "Mr. Davison," she had said one afternoon in March 2019, "I need to talk to you about the Children's Hospital project. I found some irregularities in the structural calculations." Henry, who at that time was facing marital problems and financial pressures at the company, had replied brusquely, "Isabel, I trust your work. If there are problems, solve them yourself. I don't have time to review every detail." Now, 5 years later, he understood that that had been one of the worst decisions of his life. Isabel was not just reporting small technical errors. She was trying to prevent a catastrophe that could cost the lives of innocent children. In Oakwood Heights, Sophia was so engrossed in her experiments that she didn't notice the 3 men approaching the house again. They had arrived early, before the community's morning bustle, to avoid unnecessary witnesses. The scarred man watched the girl in the backyard for a few minutes, involuntarily admiring the ingenuity of her experiments. "This girl really seems special," he commented to his companions. "Maybe we should reconsider our approach." "Orders are orders," replied the second man. a burly fellow with tattoos on his arms. The boss was clear: ensure the family's silence. They approached the low fence that bordered the backyard when Sophia finally noticed their presence. Her survival instinct, sharpened by years of living in a community where dangers occasionally arose, made her react instantly. "Grandma Martha!" she screamed, running into the house. "There are strange men in our backyard." Martha woke up startled by her granddaughter's cries. Her 78 years of experience had taught her to recognize dangerous situations, and the panic in Sophia's voice immediately alerted her. She got up with difficulty, grabbed the broomstick she kept by the bed for protection, and headed to the front door. "Who are you, and what do you want here?" Martha asked, trying to sound braver than she actually felt. "Mrs. Miller, we don't want any trouble," the scarred man said, forcing a smile that couldn't hide his intentions. "We just came to talk about your granddaughter. It seems she saw some things that would be better forgotten." "I don't know what you're talking about," Martha replied, positioning herself in front of the door to protect Sophia. "Yesterday, downtown," the second man explained, losing patience, "your granddaughter witnessed an accident. It would be very convenient if she didn't mention anything about what she saw." Sophia, hidden behind her grandmother, watched the three men intently. Her analytical mind processed every detail: the nervousness in the scarred man, the thinly disguised aggression of the other two, and especially the way they referred to yesterday's accident. Something about that situation didn't make sense. "The man who fell from the building," she said suddenly, stepping out from behind her grandmother. "You know something about it, don't you?" The three men exchanged glances, surprised by the child's perceptiveness. The scarred man knelt down to Sophia's height, trying to adopt a less threatening posture. "Listen here, little one," he said. "Sometimes it's better to pretend certain things never happened. Do you understand?" "I understand," Sophia replied, but her eyes shone with a determination that contrasted with her apparent submission. "I can forget what I saw," Martha observed her granddaughter with surprise. She knew Sophia well enough to know that the girl never forgot anything, much less something as significant as what she had witnessed the day before. "Very good," said the burly man, relieved to resolve the situation without further complications. "We hope you're a smart girl and will keep your word." After the men left, Martha slammed the door shut and turned to Sophia. "My flower, are you really going to forget what you saw yesterday?" "Of course not, Grandma," Sophia replied, her eyes shining with a mixture of indignation and determination. "But now I know that wasn't an accident. Someone tried to hurt that man on purpose." Martha felt a chill down her spine, realizing her granddaughter had gotten involved in something very dangerous. "Sophia, promise me you won't talk about this with anyone else. These people can be very dangerous." "I promise I won't talk," Sophia said, but mentally added, "not yet." Her mind was already elaborating a plan to find out more about what had really happened. At that very moment at the hospital, Henry received an unexpected visit from Dr. Alan Carter, who brought with him a young woman he didn't initially recognize. "Mr. Davison," the doctor said, "I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Claire Thompson, an engineering professor at the State University. She heard about your accident and would like to ask you some questions." Claire was a 35-year-old woman, her brown hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that showed sharp intelligence. She had come to the hospital following a hunch based on information she had collected about irregularities in public construction projects in the city. "Mr. Davison," she said, approaching the bed, "I know it may seem strange, but I am investigating some structural inconsistencies in recent public works. Your name appeared in several contracts." Henry felt his heart race. "What kind of inconsistencies?" "Inferior quality materials being used in places where top quality materials should have been. Structural calculations that don't match the original project specifications," Claire explained, "especially at the City Children's Hospital." The hospital's name hit Henry like a lightning bolt. It was exactly about that project that Isabel had tried to talk to him years ago. "Dr. Thompson, may I ask what motivated you to investigate these issues?" "An anonymous tip I received at the university," she replied. "Someone sent me copies of documents showing the irregularities. The person who made the tip seemed to know the technical details of the construction very well." Henry closed his eyes, immediately suspecting who might have made that tip. Isabel had tried to warn him about the same problems years ago, and now someone else was resuming her investigation. "Dr. Thompson," he said carefully, "did the person who made the tip happen to mention anything about risks to the children who will use the hospital?" Yes, she did, she replied, surprised by the precision of the question. The tip spoke of a risk of structural collapse in case of overload or even a small seismic movement. At that moment, Henry made a decision that would change everything. Dr. Thompson, I need to tell you some things, but first I need to know, can you help me find someone who disappeared 5 years ago? Meanwhile, back in Oakwood Heights, Sophia was in her improvised lab, working on a new project inspired by the morning's events. She had decided she needed a way to protect herself and also to collect evidence about what was really happening. Using components from an old recorder she had found weeks earlier, she began to build a miniaturized listening device. Her tiny fingers worked with surgical precision, soldering circuits and adjusting frequencies with a skill that defied any logical explanation. If they think a 4-year-old girl can't find out the truth, she mumbled to herself, they're in for a big surprise. Martha, watching her granddaughter from the kitchen window, felt a mixture of pride and concern. She knew Sophia had inherited her mother's exceptional intelligence, but she feared that this very characteristic could put her in danger, just as it had happened to Isabel years ago. The midday sun was strong when Sophia finished her new invention. The small recorder, no, bigger than a matchbox, was ready to be tested. She knew she would have to use it carefully, but she was determined to discover the truth about the man she had saved and about the people who wanted to silence her. Unbeknownst to them, the fates of Henry, Claire, and Sophia were about to intertwine in ways none of them could imagine, revealing secrets that had been buried for years and now threatened to emerge with devastating force. 3 days had passed since the strange men's visit, and Sophia had used every moment to perfect her protective devices. Her small lab in the back of the house now housed not only the miniaturized recorder, but also a rudimentary alarm system made with empty cans, string, and small motors salvaged from broken toys. That Saturday morning, while testing a new configuration for her motion detection system, Sophia heard a different noise coming from the front of the house. It wasn't the heavy footsteps of the men who had come to intimidate them, but rather a polite knock at the door, accompanied by an unfamiliar female voice. "Good morning. Is anyone home?" the voice called. Martha, who was preparing breakfast, dried her hands on her apron and went to answer. Through the small living room window, she could see a well-dressed woman, appearing to be about 35, carrying a document folder. "Good morning, ma'am," Claire said when Martha opened the door. "My name is Claire Thompson. I'm a professor at the university. I'm looking for a girl who may have witnessed an accident downtown a few days ago." Martha's heart raced, but she tried to remain calm. "What kind of accident, ma'am?" "A man fell from the Davison Tower. Some people said a small child was nearby and may have seen what happened," Claire explained, noticing the elderly woman's growing nervousness. Sophia, who had overheard the conversation from her hiding place in the lab, decided to approach. Her scientific curiosity outweighed her caution, and she appeared behind her grandmother, observing the visitor with her large, attentive eyes. "You must be Sophia," Claire said, crouching down to the girl's height. "Some people told me you're very smart and build incredible things." "Who told you that?" Sophia asked, immediately suspicious. "A gentleman at the hospital. He said a very special girl helped him when he got hurt," Claire replied sincerely. "May I come in so we can talk?" Martha hesitated, but something in the professor's respectful demeanor made her reconsider. "You may come in, but please be quick. We don't want any trouble." The simple house impressed Claire with its organization and cleanliness, despite the evident poverty. She sat in the chair offered by Martha and watched Sophia, who maintained a cautious distance. "Sophia," Claire said gently, "Mr. Henry Davison told me you saved him with an invention of yours. Is that true?" The girl nodded slowly, her eyes shining with contained pride. "I made a drone with an inflatable net. It worked." "Incredible. Could you show me how it works?" Claire asked, genuinely interested. Sophia looked at Martha, who nodded hesitantly. The girl ran to her lab and returned carefully carrying the drone. For the next 15 minutes, she explained in detail how she had built the device, from material selection to basic control programming. Claire listened, fascinated, realizing she was in the presence of truly exceptional intelligence. "Sophia, where did you learn about electronics and programming?" "From books I find in the junkyard, and by taking apart broken appliances," she replied naturally. "My grandma says my mom also liked to build things." "Your mother was an engineer?" Claire asked. a suspicion growing in her mind. Martha intervened quickly. "Sophia's mother. She's no longer with us." "I understand," Claire said respectfully, but mentally noting another piece of the puzzle she was trying to put together. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Henry had been discharged but decided to stay an extra day to avoid meeting Victor at the office over the weekend. He was using the time to mentally review everything he knew about Isabel's disappearance. His personal secretary, Michelle Davis, had worked at the company during Isabel's time there. If anyone could provide information about the engineer's last days, it would be her. Henry made a call, asking Michelle to visit him at the hospital. "Mr. Davison, what a terrible scare," Michelle said upon entering the room. She was a 50-year-old woman, efficient and discreet, who had worked for Henry for over a decade. "Michelle, I need to ask you something very important," Henry said, dispensing with formalities. "Do you remember Isabel Miller, the engineer who worked with us 5 years ago?" "Of course I do. Very competent woman, always dedicated." "Why do you ask?" "Do you remember her last days at the company? Did anything strange happen?" Michelle thought for a moment. "Now that you mention it, yes. In her last days, she seemed very worried about something. She spent hours reviewing the children's hospital projects, doing calculations I didn't understand." "Did she ever say anything about problems with the construction?" "Several times. She tried to schedule meetings with you, but you were very busy at the time," Michelle said, recalling the details. "On her last day, she was visibly nervous. She received some calls that made her very agitated." "What kind of calls?" "I don't know, sir, but after one of them, she ran out of the office. That was the last time I saw her." Henry felt a knot in his stomach. "Michelle, do you know anything about her daughter?" "Isabel had a small daughter, very bright. Sometimes she would bring the child to the office on weekends, and it was impressive to see how interested the little one was in the equipment," Michelle remembered. "The girl must be about 8 or 9 now." "Actually, she's 4, Henry corrected, making Michelle frown. "That's impossible, Mr. Davison. Isabel's daughter was born in 2015. She should be—" "Wait," Henry interrupted, his heart racing. "Are you sure about that date?" "Absolutely. I remember because Isabel took maternity leave that year," Michelle confirmed. "The numbers didn't add up. If Isabel's daughter was born in 2015, she should be 9 years old now, not 4. Either there was an error in the information or—" At that moment, his cell phone rang. It was Claire. "Mr. Davison, I just left the house of the girl who saved you," she said without preamble. "I urgently need to talk to you about some discoveries." "What discoveries?" "I'd rather not talk over the phone. Can you meet me in an hour at the cafe near the hospital?" "I can, but can you give me a hint of what you found?" "The girl who saved you. Her name is Sophia. She's 4 years old, and she lives with her grandmother." "Mr. Davison, I think we've found Isabel Miller's daughter." Henry nearly dropped the phone. "What do you mean?" "Her grandmother avoided talking about her mother, but I managed to get some information. And there's something else. This child has extraordinary intelligence. She built a functional drone using scrap, Mr. Davison, a 4-year-old. After hanging up, Henry tried to process the information. If Sophia was indeed Isabel's daughter, it meant the engineer had lied about her daughter's birth date, or something much more complicated was going on. Back in Oakwood Heights, Sophia had said goodbye to Claire with a mixture of curiosity and caution. She had liked the professor, but her instinct told her not to completely trust anyone until she better understood what was happening. "Grandma," she said after Claire left, "why did you get nervous when she asked about my mom?" Martha sighed deeply, knowing she could no longer postpone that conversation. "Sophia, your mother, her situation is complicated." "Complicated how?" "She didn't die, my flower. She had to leave." Sophia's world seemed to crumble and rebuild at the same time. "She's alive?" "She is, but she couldn't stay here for reasons you're too young to understand," Martha said, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "Where is she?" Sophia asked, her voice small but determined. "I don't know, my flower. She had to hide." Sophia remained silent for a long moment, processing the most important information of her life. Her mother was alive, but had disappeared for some dangerous reason. Suddenly, all the pieces began to fall into place. The men who came to intimidate them, the accident that wasn't an accident, and now a university professor asking questions about her mother. "Grandma," she said finally, "I think I know why my mom had to hide, and I think I know how to find her." Martha looked at her granddaughter, seeing in Sophia's eyes the same fierce determination that had characterized Isabel years ago. She knew that, from that moment on, nothing in their lives would be the same. As the sun set over Harmony Creek, 3 people, in different parts of the city, were coming to the same conclusion. The secrets of the past were about to emerge, and the small 4-year-old genius would be the key to unraveling a conspiracy that had destroyed a family and threatened the safety of hundreds of innocent children. The meeting at the cafe near the hospital took place on a muggy Sunday afternoon. Henry arrived first, choosing a table in the back of the establishment to ensure privacy. His ribs still hurt, but the anxiety for answers surpassed any physical discomfort. When Claire entered, he noticed she was carrying not only her usual briefcase, but also a small box that piqued his curiosity. "Mr. Davison, thank you for coming," Claire said, sitting across from him. "What I'm about to tell you may seem impossible, but I need you to listen carefully." "I'm listening," Henry replied, ordering 2 coffees from the approaching waiter. "The girl who saved you is Sophia Miller. She lives with her grandmother, Martha Miller, in Oakwood Heights," Claire began, opening her briefcase. "During our conversation, I was able to confirm that her mother's name was Isabel." Henry felt his heart race. "That doesn't prove it's the same Isabel who worked with me." "No, but this does," Claire said, pulling a small object from the box that made Henry pale. It was a picture frame with a photo of Isabel Miller holding a baby. On the frame, there was a handwritten dedication. "To my mother Martha, who always believed in my dreams, Isabel and Sophia, 2020. "Where did you get that?" Henry asked, his hands trembling slightly. "Her grandmother showed it to me when I mentioned I knew someone who had worked with an engineer named Isabel. She thought I might have news of her daughter," Claire explained. "Mr. Davison, this child is not 4 years old. She's 9. "What do you mean?" I asked the grandmother some discreet questions about Sophia's developmental milestones. "A 4-year-old doesn't build functional drones or master advanced electronics concepts," Claire said, pulling a notebook from her briefcase. "Also, analyzing the photo and comparing it with current physical characteristics, I estimate Sophia to be between 8 and 9 years old." Henry processed the information with growing horror. Why would the grandmother lie about her age? "Protection," Claire replied without hesitation. "If someone was looking for a child born in 2015, it would be much harder to find her if she was officially born in 2019. "Are you suggesting they falsified Sophia's age in her documents?" "I'm suggesting Isabel Miller anticipated that her daughter might be in danger and took extreme measures to protect her," Claire said, her voice filled with admiration, "including altering official records and instructing her mother to lie about basic details of the child." Meanwhile, in Oakwood Heights, Sophia was conducting her own investigation. After the revelation that her mother was alive, she had locked herself in her lab to process the information and plan her next steps. Her brilliant mind had quickly connected the dots between Henry's accident, the visit of the intimidating men, and her mother's disappearance. If Mom hid, it was because someone wanted to hurt her, she mumbled to herself, adjusting the components of her miniaturized recorder. And if they tried to hurt the man I saved, maybe it's for the same reason. She had decided to test her theory in a way that only a 9-year-old genius disguised as a 4-year-old could conceive. Sophia took her recorder and connected it to an improvised amplifier she had built, using old radio speakers. Her plan was simple. If the men came back to intimidate them again, she would record everything and then use the recordings as evidence. Martha watched her granddaughter with growing concern. Since revealing the truth about Isabel, Sophia had become even more determined and focused, characteristics that painfully reminded her of her disappeared daughter. "Sophia, my flower, you have to promise you won't get involved in anything dangerous," Martha said, entering the improvised lab. "Grandma, if my mom hid to protect us, then we have to protect ourselves too," Sophia replied, without looking up from her work. "And the best way to protect ourselves is to find out the truth. But you're still too young to—" "I'm not young," Sophia interrupted, finally looking at her grandmother. "And you know that. That's why they changed my age on the papers, wasn't it?" Martha sighed, realizing she could no longer keep Sophia in the dark. "How did you find out?" "The professor asked questions about things only an older child would know. And I remember things from when I was younger, Grandma. I remember my mom teaching me to read when I was really 3, Sophia explained. "Why did they have to lie about my age?" Because your mom said it would be safer if no one knew exactly when you were born, Martha admitted. She said bad people could use that information to find you. At the cafe, Henry was reaching the same conclusions. Claire, if Isabel altered her daughter's documents, it means she knew she was in danger a long time ago. Exactly. And there's more, Claire said, pulling other papers from her briefcase. I gained access to Isabel's academic records at the university. She was brilliant, specializing in structural analysis and construction safety. Her master's thesis was on identifying fraud in civil engineering projects. She was qualified to detect exactly the kind of irregularity Victor was committing, Henry murmured. And more. I found records that she tried to contact the State Board of Engineers in the months before her disappearance. Apparently, she was preparing a formal complaint. Henry felt a wave of guilt and regret. If I had only listened to her then— Mr. Davison, Claire interrupted, now is not the time for lamentations. We need to focus on finding Isabel and ensuring Sophia's safety. Do you think the girl is still in danger? I think we all are, Claire replied gravely. If Victor Morales discovers that Sophia is Isabel's daughter, he will realize she represents a much bigger threat than he imagined. At that exact moment, as if fate wanted to confirm Claire's fears, Victor was in his private office, making calls to his most questionable contacts. The university professor's visit had not gone unnoticed by his informants in the city. Are you sure it was the same woman who was at the hospital asking about irregularities? He asked on the phone. Absolutely, replied the voice on the other end. And she went straight to Oakwood Heights to look for the girl who witnessed your accident with Henry. Victor felt his blood run cold. If a university professor was connecting the dots between Henry's accident, the irregularities in the public works, and the girl who had witnessed them, they would soon discover much more than he could allow. I need you to speed up the timeline, he said, his voice tense. The situation is getting out of control. What do you want us to do? First, I want you to maintain constant surveillance on the professor. Second, I want detailed information about the girl and her grandmother. And third, he paused, thinking about the consequences of his next words. Maybe it's time to resolve the Isabel Miller problem definitively. Back in Mrs. Carmen Rodriguez's house in Oakwood Heights, Sophia had finished calibrating her recording system when she heard a strange noise coming from the roof. Her improvised alarm system had detected movement above the house, but the pattern was different from normal human footsteps. Grabbing one of the flashlights she had modified for longer range, she silently walked into the backyard and aimed the beam of light at the roof. What she saw made her run back into the house. "Grandma! Grandma!" she shouted, finding Martha dozing in the armchair. "There's someone on our roof." Martha woke with a start. "What do you mean?" "I saw someone moving up there. I think they're trying to listen to our conversations," Sophia said, her mind already devising countermeasures. Just then, there was a knock at the door. But this time it wasn't a polite knock like Professor Claire's, nor aggressive like the intimidating men. It was an urgent, almost desperate knock. Martha approached the window and saw an unknown man standing at the door. He was tall, well-dressed, but his posture showed extreme nervousness. "Mrs. Miller," the man called, "my name is Henry Davison. You need to get out of there right now. You're in danger." Sophia recognized the name immediately. It was the man she had saved. But why was he here? And why did he say they were in danger? "Don't open the door, Grandma," she whispered. "It could be a trap." But at that moment, the sound of heavy footsteps approaching down the street made both Henry and the residents of the house realize that it might be too late for discreet escapes. Victor's men had arrived, and this time they weren't just coming to intimidate. The first battle for Sophia was about to begin, and neither Henry nor the girl herself imagined how far their enemies were willing to go to keep their secrets buried forever. Time seemed to slow down as Henry realized that 3 men were approaching down the street, walking with the determination of those on a specific mission. He immediately recognized the movement pattern. He had seen mercenaries act this way in movies, but he never imagined he would witness something like this in real life. "Mrs. Miller?" he shouted louder, banging on the door with urgency. "Please trust me. I'm the man your granddaughter saved. She told me about the men who came to intimidate you." Inside the house, Sophia made a decision that surprised even her grandmother. Instead of hiding, she ran to her lab and grabbed one of the devices she had built specifically for emergency situations. It was a small device that emitted a high-pitched sound and flashed intermittent lights. a child's version of a panic alarm. "Grandma, we'll have to trust him," she said, returning to the living room. "If he wanted to hurt us, he wouldn't be warning us about the other men." Martha, with her decades of experience in judging people, reached the same conclusion. She quickly opened the door, allowing Henry to enter. The businessman was impressed to see Sophia in person for the second time, now noticing details that the previous emergency had not allowed them to observe. "You look older than I imagined," he commented, without thinking twice. "I'm 9, not 4, Sophia replied directly, surprising Henry with her frankness. "They changed my age on my documents to protect me." "Protect you from what?" Henry asked, though he suspected the answer. "From the same people who tried to hurt you," she said, activating her alarm device. "And who are coming now?" Sophia's device began to emit intermittent sounds, while red lights flashed in sequence. It was an impressive sight for something built from scrap, but Henry didn't have time to admire the girl's ingenuity. "We need to get out of here," he said, looking out the window. The 3 men had stopped a few feet from the house and were clearly organizing for a coordinated approach. "We can't go out the front," Sophia observed, her mind working quickly. "But I can create a distraction." "What kind of distraction?" Henry asked. In response, Sophia grabbed another device from her collection, a small launcher she had built using pen springs and paper tubes. She loaded it with small improvised smoke bombs made from firework powder found after the July 4th celebrations. "When I fire these smoke bombs, you run to the back of the house," she explained with the calm of a military strategist. "There's an opening in the backyard fence that leads to the vacant lot behind." Martha watched her granddaughter with a mixture of pride and terror. "Sophia, you can't stay here. Alone." "I won't," she said, grabbing a small backpack where she had stored her most important devices. "But someone needs to make sure they don't follow us immediately." Henry was impressed by the girl's maturity, but at the same time horrified by the situation in which a 9-year-old had to show so much courage. "Sophia, this is very dangerous." "It's more dangerous to let them catch us," she interrupted, positioning herself at the side window of the house. "My mom taught me that sometimes we need to be brave to protect those we love." It was the first time she had mentioned direct memories of Isabel, and both Henry and Martha realized the importance of that moment. Sophia wasn't just fleeing. She was following lessons she had received from her disappeared mother. "Ready?" she asked, adjusting the aim of her improvised launcher. The 3 men had reached the front door of the house when the first smoke bombs exploded right in front of them. The dense, acrid smoke caught them completely off guard, causing violent coughing and temporary disorientation. "Now!" Sophia shouted, firing 2 more bombs before running after Henry and Martha towards the back of the property. The plan worked perfectly. In the time it took the men to recover from the surprise and the smoke, the trio had already crossed the backyard and gone through the opening in the fence Sophia had mentioned. The vacant lot behind the Oakwood Heights houses was a labyrinth of rubble and wild vegetation, offering adequate cover for their escape. Sophia knew every inch of that terrain, as she often looked there for the materials she used in her inventions. "This way," she said, guiding the adults through a path that only she could see among the debris. Henry helped Martha walk over the uneven terrain, impressed by the 78-year-old woman's resilience. "Where are we going?" he asked. "To Mrs. Carmen's house," Sophia replied. "She lives on the other side of the lot and has always been a family friend. She'll hide us until we figure out what to do." As they walked, Sophia activated another of her devices, a small transmitter that sent signals to trackers she had strategically placed in the neighborhood in previous weeks. It was her homemade tracking system, which would allow her to monitor the movements of the men pursuing them. "Sophia," Henry said during a pause for Martha to rest, "I need to tell you some things about your mother." "She worked for you, didn't she?" Sophia asked, showing that she had already connected that piece of the puzzle. "She did, and she tried to warn me about the same things that almost killed me a few days ago," Henry admitted, guilt heavy in his voice. "Why didn't you listen to her?" Sophia's simple, direct question hit Henry like a dagger. "Because I was too worried about my own problems to realize she was trying to save lives." Sophia processed this information in silence as they resumed walking. Her analytical mind was assembling an increasingly clear picture of the situation. Her mother had discovered something dangerous at work, tried to warn her boss, and when she realized she wouldn't be heard, decided to act on her own. This had put her, and by extension, Sophia, in danger. "Mr. Davison," she said, when they arrived at Mrs. Carmen's house. "Do you know where my mom is now?" "I don't know, but I'm looking for her," he replied honestly, "and I have a professor friend who's helping me." Mrs. Carmen Rodriguez, a robust 60-year-old woman who worked as a seamstress, received the trio without asking questions. She had known Martha for decades and had watched Sophia grow up since she was a baby. When the girl quickly explained they were fleeing dangerous men, Carmen did not hesitate to offer refuge. "You can stay here as long as you need," she said, preparing coffee for everyone. "But what's going on, Martha?" It was Sophia who answered, with a maturity that continued to surprise Henry. "My mom found out that some people were building dangerous buildings for children. When she tried to tell everyone, those people made her disappear. Now they know I exist and are trying to hurt us too." Carmen looked at Henry with suspicion. "And this gentleman? How do we know he's not involved?" "Because he's the one I saved when he fell from the building," Sophia explained. "The bad people pushed him from up there because he discovered the same things my mom discovered." "Is that true?" Carmen asked Henry directly. "Unfortunately, yes," he confirmed. "And now we are all in danger." At that moment, Sophia's tracking device emitted a signal. She looked at the small, improvised screen and frowned. "They've left our house and are spreading through the neighborhood," she reported. "They must be looking for us." "How do you know that?" Henry asked, fascinated by the girl's homemade technology. "I put trackers at various points in the neighborhood," Sophia explained, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "When someone passes nearby, they send signals to this receiver." Henry shook his head in admiration. "Your mother really taught you a lot." "She said knowledge was the only thing no one could take from me," Sophia replied, her eyes shining with determination, "and that if she was ever not around, I would have to use everything I learned to protect myself and Grandma." It was then that Henry fully understood what Isabel had done. She hadn't just hidden her daughter, she had prepared her to survive in a dangerous world, teaching her skills that a normal child would never need to learn. "Sophia," he said, making an important decision, "what if I told you I know how we can find your mom?" The girl's eyes widened. "How?" "My professor friend found clues about where she might be hiding, but to get to her, we'll first need to get rid of the people who are chasing us." "And how are we going to do that?" Henry looked at that extraordinary child who had saved his life and realized that perhaps she could also save much more than that. "We're going to use your inventions to catch them red-handed doing wrong things," he said. "And then we're going to hand them over to the authorities along with all the evidence we have about what they did to your mom." Sophia smiled for the first time since the chase had begun. It was a smile that mixed hope with determination, and that promised that the battle for her family's secrets was just beginning. The night had fallen over Harmony Creek when Claire received an urgent call from Henry. She was in her apartment, reviewing documents about Isabel Miller, when the phone rang insistently. "Claire, we need to meet now," Henry's tense voice said. "I found Sophia and her grandmother, but the situation is much more dangerous than we imagined." "Where are you?" she asked, already grabbing her car keys. "At a neighbor's house in Oakwood Heights. I'll send the location via message. And Claire, bring your laptop and any recording equipment you have." "Why?" "Because Sophia has a plan, and I think it might work." 40 minutes later, Claire was sitting in Mrs. Carmen Rodriguez's simple living room, observing one of the most surreal scenes of her life. A 9-year-old girl, disguised as 4 in official documents, had spread a collection of electronic devices she had built herself on the table, explaining in technical detail how she intended to expose a conspiracy involving public works fraud. "Professor Thompson," Sophia said, adjusting a small transmitter, "Mr. Davison told me you have proof that they are building the children's hospital incorrectly." "I do have some evidence." "Yes," Claire confirmed, still trying to process the girl's extraordinary intelligence. "And I have evidence that they pushed Mr. Davison from the building and sent men to intimidate us," Sophia continued, showing her miniaturized recorder. "If we put it all together, we can prove they are criminals." "Sophia," Claire said carefully, "this is very dangerous. Even if we get the evidence, these people might try to retaliate." "They're already trying to hurt us," the girl replied with relentless logic. "And as long as they're free, I'll never be able to find my mother." It was then that Sophia mentioned something that made Claire's heart race. "My mother taught me that when bad people do bad things, the only way to stop them is to show everyone what they've done." "Your mother told you that?" Claire asked. "She did. She always said I was special, and that one day I could help a lot of people with my intelligence, Sophia recalled. She said bad people are afraid of smart kids because they can't fool them. Henry and Claire exchanged meaningful glances. Isabel had prepared her daughter not only to survive, but to fight. "What's your plan, Sophia?" Claire asked, deciding to trust the girl's genius. Sophia opened a notebook where she had drawn complex diagrams. First part, use my devices to record a conversation between the bad man and his henchmen, where they confess what they did. "How are we going to do that?" Henry asked. "By letting them think they caught me," Sophia replied with a smile that mixed innocence with cunning. "If I appear alone in a place where they can see me, they'll try to capture me. At that moment, I'll activate my hidden recorder." "Absolutely not," Martha said immediately. "I won't let you expose yourself like that." "Grandma, it's the only way," Sophia insisted. "They won't suspect that a 4-year-old child, that's how they think I am, can be recording them." "What if something goes wrong?" Claire asked. "That's why there's a second part to the plan," Sophia said, pointing to another diagram. "I'll use my drone to live-stream everything to the professor's computer. If something happens to me, you'll still have the evidence." The sophistication of the plan impressed even Claire. "How did a 9-year-old girl learn tactical strategy?" "My mom gave me books about solving complex problems," Sophia explained. "She said it doesn't matter what the problem is. There's always a solution if you think it through." While they discussed the details on the other side of the city, Victor was having a much less harmonious meeting. His men had returned empty-handed, and he was getting desperate. "What do you mean you couldn't catch a child and an old lady?" he yelled in his private office. "The girl had traps set," the scarred man explained. "Smoke bombs, some kind of alarm. It was as if she knew we were coming." "And where are they now?" "They disappeared into the poor neighborhood. Could be in any house around here." Victor walked to the window, observing the city lights. "This is getting out of control. If this girl really is Isabel Miller's daughter, she might have information that would destroy us." "What do you want us to do, boss?" "I want you to monitor all the exit points of the city, bus station, airport, main roads," Victor ordered. "If they try to flee, I want to know immediately. And if we find them—" Victor hesitated for a moment, thinking about the consequences of his next words. "Do whatever is necessary to ensure their silence permanently." Back at Mrs. Carmen Rodriguez's house, Sophia's plan was being refined. Claire had connected her laptop to the girl's devices, creating a transmission system that would allow everything to be monitored remotely. "Sophia," Henry said, "there's something I need to tell you about where your mom might be." "What?" she asked, stopping adjusting her equipment. "Claire found clues about someone with the false name Sarah Miller, living in a small town 2 hours from here. The profile matches your mother." Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained firm. "So, she's all right?" "Apparently she is, but we can only be sure after we resolve this situation," Claire said gently. "Another reason for the plan to work," Sophia said, wiping her eyes and returning to work. 2 hours later, everything was prepared. Sophia had tested all the devices multiple times, and the transmission system was working perfectly. The plan was simple in its conception, but complex in its execution. Sophia would appear downtown the next morning, pretending to be alone and lost. When Victor's men found her, she would lead them to a location where she could record their confessions. "Remember," she said, reviewing the final details, "I need them to confess about pushing Mr. Davison, about intimidating my family, and about what they did to my mother. Only then will we have enough evidence." "What if they don't confess?" Martha asked, still worried about the plan. "They will confess," Sophia said confidently. "Bad people like to talk about the bad things they've done when they think no one can stop them." The next morning, Sophia woke before dawn. She put on her simplest clothes and purposely dirtied her face to look like a lost and frightened child. She stored her devices in strategic places on her body, all camouflaged to look like toys or innocent objects. "My flower," Martha said, hugging her granddaughter. "Are you sure about this?" "I am, Grandma. And after it's over, we'll be able to find my mom and be together again," Sophia replied, showing a courage that far exceeded her apparent age. Henry and Claire were positioned at strategic points in the city, ready to intervene if necessary. Claire's laptop showed the signals from Sophia's devices, confirming that everything was working. At 9 o'clock in the morning, Sophia appeared in Harmony Creek's central square. walking slowly and looking around as if searching for someone. It wasn't long before Victor's men spotted her. "There she is," one of them said over the radio. "The girl is alone in the square. Get her, but be discreet," Victor's voice replied, "and bring her directly to me. I want to talk personally with Isabel Miller's daughter." Sophia saw the men approaching and began to play the role of a frightened child. But inside, her mind was calm and focused. The time had come to discover the truth about what had happened to her mother, and she was determined to use all her intelligence to get justice. What she didn't know was that Victor had prepared a surprise that would test not only her courage, but also her ability to improvise under extreme pressure. The final battle for her family's secrets was about to begin, and this time there would be no escape. The men approached Sophia cautiously, trying to appear harmless so as not to scare the supposed 4-year-old child. She continued to play the role of a lost and confused girl, allowing them to get close enough for her recording devices to clearly capture their voices. "Hey, little one," the scarred man said, crouching down to her height. "Are you lost? Where are your parents?" "I don't know," Sophia replied with a deliberately childish voice. "Grandma went out to buy medicine, and I don't know where she went." "Don't worry," the second man said, making discreet signals to Bawa, his companions. "We'll help you find your grandma. But first, how about we go somewhere safer?" Sophia feigned hesitation, as a genuinely scared child would. "Do you know Grandma Martha?" "Yes, we do," the third man lied. "She asked us to come get you." It was exactly the confirmation Sophia needed. Her devices were recording evidence of kidnapping and lying to a child. She allowed them to take her, maintaining her act while mentally mapping their route. They took her to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, an isolated location where Victor usually conducted his shadiest business. Sophia noticed that the building had several possible exits and began to plan escape routes, if necessary. Victor was waiting when they arrived. At 55, he was an imposing man, accustomed to intimidating through physical presence and economic power. When he saw Sophia, however, he was surprised by how small she seemed. "So this is Isabel Miller's famous daughter," he said, circling the girl like a predator studying its prey. "Who is Isabel?" Sophia asked, maintaining her facade of innocence. "My mother's name is Sarah." Victor laughed coldly. "Very clever, your mother. Taught you to lie from a young age." He knelt in front of Sophia, his cold eyes fixed on hers. "But I know exactly who you are, Sophia Miller." The girl felt a chill, hearing her real name, but maintained her composure. "I don't know what you're talking about. Your mother caused me a lot of trouble 5 years ago." Victor continued, his voice heavy with resentment. "She discovered things she shouldn't have discovered and tried to ruin my business." "What business?" Sophia asked, feigning childish curiosity while her devices recorded every word. "Business a child doesn't need to understand," Victor replied. "But I'll tell you one thing. Your mother didn't disappear by chance. I forced her out of town." Sophia's heart pounded, but she managed to keep a neutral expression. "What do you mean?" "I told her that bad things would happen to you if she kept asking questions about my projects," Victor confessed, clearly enjoying finally being able to tell his side of the story. She had to choose between exposing the truth and protecting her daughter. She chose to protect you. The words hit Sophia like daggers, but they also confirmed what she had always known deep down. Her mother loved her more than anything in the world and had sacrificed everything to keep her safe. "And now," Victor continued, "you're causing the same problems your mother did. You saved that idiot Henry when I tried to eliminate him. You've been asking inconvenient questions, and even worse, you've attracted the attention of that university professor." "I just want to find my mom," Sophia said, letting a real tear roll down her face. "Your mother is fine where she is," Victor said cruelly, "but you've become a problem that needs to be solved." It was then that one of the men approached Victor and whispered something in his ear. The businessman's face contorted with rage. "What do you mean they're coming here?" he asked loudly, momentarily forgetting about Sophia. "Henry and the professor," the man explained. "Our lookout saw them heading this way." Victor cursed violently. "How did they find out where we are?" Sophia smiled inwardly. Her tracking system was working perfectly. Henry and Claire were following the signals from her devices to reach her. "It doesn't matter," Victor said, making a hasty decision. "Let's finish this now. Take the girl to the car. We'll solve everything at once." "Where are we going?" one of the men asked. To the children's hospital, Victor replied with a sinister smile. If everyone wants to know so much about the construction problems, I'll show them personally. Sophia felt her blood run cold. The compromised hospital where hundreds of children would be treated. Victor was planning something terrible. Boss? The scarred man hesitated. The hospital hasn't opened yet. No one's there. Exactly, Victor responded. The perfect place for a structural accident that will erase all evidence and eliminate all witnesses at once. Sophia's mind worked quickly. Victor intended to cause the hospital to collapse with her, Henry, and Claire inside, making it seem like they died investigating structural irregularities. It would be the perfect crime. As they carried her to the car, Sophia discreetly activated another of her devices, an emergency transmitter that would send her exact location to a pre-programmed number. It wasn't Henry's or Claire's number, but Mrs. Carmen Rodriguez's, who had been instructed to contact the authorities if she received the signal. During the drive to the hospital, Victor continued talking, seemingly relieved to finally be able to boast about his crimes. Your mother was always too smart for her own good, he said. She discovered that we were using inferior quality materials in the hospital structure, that the resistance calculations were false, that the entire project was compromised. Why did you do that? Sophia asked, genuinely curious about the motivation behind such cruelty. Money, obviously, Victor replied without remorse. We used cheap materials and pocketed the difference. The hospital was going to cost $20 million, but with our adjustments, it only cost $8 million in extra profit. But what about the children who will use the hospital? Their problem, Victor said coldly. Poor children die every day for various reasons. A few more or less makes no difference. The coldness of that statement shocked even the men who worked for Victor. Sophia realized she was dealing with someone completely devoid of moral conscience. When they arrived at the city children's hospital, Sophia was impressed by the size of the building. It was a 5-story building destined to serve the entire Midville metropolitan area. Hundreds of children would pass through there daily when it was operational. Beautiful, isn't it? Victor said sarcastically. Too bad it will collapse before it even opens. They entered the building through a side entrance. The interior was almost completely finished, with long corridors, equipped rooms, and even some medical equipment already installed. To an ordinary observer, everything seemed perfect. Come, girl, Victor said, pushing Sophia towards the elevators. I'll show you exactly where your mother discovered the problems. They went up to the 4th floor, where Victor stopped in front of a wall that looked normal, but was marked with small symbols that Sophia recognized as engineering notations. Your mother found out that this central support wall is made of diluted concrete, Victor explained. It has only half the necessary strength. A small tremor, or even an overload of weight on the upper floor, would be enough to bring down the entire building. Sophia carefully observed the markings on the wall, memorizing every detail. Her mother had been there, had discovered the fraud, and tried to prevent a tragedy. And now, Victor said, checking his watch, your friends should be arriving. When they're all here, we're going to cause a little accident that will solve all my problems at once. It was at this moment that Sophia realized she needed to act. Her plan to record confessions had worked perfectly, but now she faced a much greater threat than she had imagined. Victor was not only willing to silence her, he was planning to destroy evidence and eliminate witnesses through a disaster that could be attributed to the very structural flaws he had created. Discreetly, she began to activate all the devices she still had on her, preparing for the most important battle of her life. The moment Victor finished explaining his grim plan, the sound of footsteps echoed through the hospital corridors. Henry and Claire had arrived, following the signals from Sophia's devices through the tracking system she had created. Excellent, Victor said with sinister satisfaction. Now I can solve all my problems at once. He signaled to his men, who strategically positioned themselves in the corridors. Sophia realized she was about to witness something terrible, and that she needed to act quickly to save not only her own life, but also Henry's and Claire's. Mr. Morales, she said, feigning the innocence of a 4-year-old child, can I ask a question? What is it? He replied, clearly annoyed at being interrupted by a child. How are you going to make the building fall without hurting us who are inside? The question caught Victor off guard. He had planned to eliminate the witnesses, but he hadn't considered explaining the details to a child. I'm not going to explain that to you. But I want to understand, Sophia insisted, her mind working quickly. My mom always said it was important to understand how things work. It was then that Henry and Claire appeared in the corridor, their voices echoing as they approached. "Sophia, where are you?" Henry shouted. "We're on the 4th floor," Victor replied loudly, surprising his own men. "Come up here." "Boss," the scarred man whispered, "why are you calling them?" "Because I want everyone in the same place when the accident happens," Victor replied coldly. Sophia took advantage of the distraction to discreetly activate another of her devices. It was a small transmitter that would send all the recordings she had collected directly to Claire's laptop, ensuring that the evidence would be preserved even if something happened to her. When Henry and Claire reached the 4th floor, they found a scene that horrified them. Victor was holding Sophia by the arm, surrounded by 3 armed men, in front of the compromised wall that Isabel had discovered years ago. "Victor!" Henry exclaimed. "Release the girl immediately." "I don't think you're in a position to make demands, Henry," Victor replied with a cruel smile, "especially considering you're about to have a very unfortunate accident." Claire quickly observed the environment, her trained engineer's mind immediately identifying the structural irregularities that Isabel had documented. "You actually did this," she said with growing horror. "You intentionally compromised the structural safety of a children's hospital." "I did what was necessary to maximize profits," Victor replied without remorse, "and now I'll do what's necessary to protect those profits." He signaled again to his men, who positioned themselves to block the exits. It was obvious that Victor did not intend to let any of them leave that place alive. It was at this moment that Sophia made the bravest decision of her life. Instead of continuing to pretend to be a helpless child, she decided to reveal her true intelligence and use all the resources her mother had taught her. "Mr. Morales," she said, her voice changing to a more mature and determined tone, "there's something you don't know about me." Everyone in the corridor turned to look at her, surprised by the sudden change in her posture and speech. "I'm not 4 years old," Sophia continued. "I'm 9, and my mother taught me much more than just building little toys." Victor frowned, beginning to realize he had severely underestimated his young captive. "In the last 20 minutes, Sophia went on, "I recorded everything you confessed about forcing my mother to flee, about pushing Mr. Davison from the building, about using bad materials in the hospital, and about planning to hurt us today." "That's impossible," Victor said, but his voice showed growing nervousness. "It's not impossible when you know electronics," Sophia replied, showing the small recorder she had kept hidden. "And when your mother teaches you that bad people always like to brag about the bad things they've done?" Claire watched the girl with growing admiration, realizing that Sophia had executed a much more sophisticated plan than anyone had imagined. "Furthermore," Sophia continued, "all the recordings have already been automatically sent to Professor Thompson's computer and to other people who are waiting outside." Victor paled. "What other people?" "The people Mrs. Carmen Rodriguez called when she received my emergency signal," Sophia explained, with a smile that mixed triumph with determination. "They should be arriving any moment." As if her words had invoked reality, the sound of sirens began to echo from outside the hospital. Several sirens approaching rapidly. "No!" Victor shouted, realizing his plan was crumbling. "You won't ruin everything I've built." In a moment of desperation, he went to the compromised wall and began to hit it forcefully, trying to cause the structural collapse that would eliminate all evidence. "He's trying to bring down the building," Claire shouted. "We need to get out of here now." But Sophia had other plans. Instead of fleeing, she ran towards Victor and activated another of her devices, a small apparatus that emitted a high-pitched sound and flashed intense lights. It was an improved version of her alarm siren, designed specifically to disorient people in enclosed spaces. The effect was instantaneous. Victor and his men were temporarily blinded and deafened by the device, allowing Henry and Claire to act. Henry, despite still recovering from his injuries, managed to incapacitate one of the men, while Claire used her purse to disarm another. The scarred man tried to flee, but Sophia had prepared a final surprise. She activated a device she had hidden near the stairs, a mechanism that released a sticky substance on the floor, made with concentrated school glue and other ingredients she had experimented with at home. The man slipped and fell, becoming temporarily stuck to the floor. "How did a 9-year-old girl learn to do that?" Claire asked, impressed by the efficiency of Sophia's inventions. "My mom told me that if she ever couldn't protect me, I would have to learn to protect myself," Sophia replied. "She taught me that the best defense is always to be prepared." The sirens were getting closer when Victor, partially recovered from the disorientation, made one last desperate attempt. He grabbed a hammer that had been left by the workers and tried to strike the compromised wall with all his strength. "If I can't have my profits, at least I'll make sure there's no evidence," he yelled. But Sophia had anticipated even that. When Victor raised the hammer, she activated her last device, a small drone she had kept hidden in her backpack. The drone flew directly towards the hammer, deflecting the blow and causing Victor to lose his balance. "Impossible," Victor muttered, falling to the floor. "A child cannot be smarter than me." "I'm not just a child," Sophia said, helping Henry tie up the men with cables she had found on site. "I'm Isabel Miller's daughter, and she taught me that intelligence always wins over greed." It was then that civil police officers and engineers from the State Board arrived at the hospital, guided by the information Mrs. Carmen Rodriguez had provided based on Sophia's emergency signals. "What's going on here?" asked the lead detective. "Public works fraud, attempted murder, and conspiracy to destroy evidence," Claire replied, showing her laptop where all of Sophia's recordings had been stored. "And we have evidence for everything." As Victor and his men were being detained, Sophia looked out the hospital window and saw more cars arriving. One of them particularly caught her attention. It was a small car, driven by a woman who looked vaguely familiar. "Professor Thompson?" she said, her heart racing. "Who is that woman getting out of the blue car?" Claire looked out the window and smiled. "That, my dear Sophia, is someone you haven't seen in a long time." The woman getting out of the car had curly hair like Sophia's, large, intelligent eyes, and carried a briefcase that suggested a technical profession. Even from afar, the resemblance between her and the girl was striking. "Mom," Sophia whispered, barely believing what she was seeing. Isabel Miller had finally returned home, drawn by the news that her daughter was in danger. And now, with Victor arrested and the truth finally revealed, mother and daughter could reunite after 5 long years of separation. Sophia's nightmare was coming to an end, but her true journey, that of reuniting with her mother and rebuilding her family, was just beginning. Sophia descended the hospital stairs as if in a dream. Each step brought her closer to the woman who had appeared from the blue car, the woman she had only seen in dusty photographs kept by Martha all these years. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear her own pulse in her ears. Isabel Miller stopped at the hospital entrance when she saw the girl coming down the stairs. For a moment, both stood motionless, separated by just a few feet, but united by years of longing and love that never faded. Isabel had changed. She was thinner, with some grey streaks in her curly hair, and her eyes carried the weight of 5 years of forced exile. "Sophia?" Isabel said in a trembling voice, barely believing she was seeing her daughter. "My little genius?" "Mom," Sophia replied, her voice a whisper filled with emotion. The reunion took place in the middle of the hospital lobby, under the emotional gaze of Henry, Claire, and even the police officers who were processing the scene. Mother and daughter hugged with an intensity that spoke of years of separation, of nights when one had dreamed of the other, of a love that neither distance nor fear could diminish. "You've grown so much," Isabel said, caressing her daughter's face with tears streaming freely. "And you're so smart. I heard you saved a lot of people today." "I used everything you taught me," Sophia replied, also crying, "about solving problems, about being brave, about not letting bad people hurt other people." "My daughter," Isabel murmured, "you shouldn't have had to use those lessons alone. I should have been here." "Why did you leave?" Sophia asked, the question that had tormented her since she discovered her mother was alive. Isabel looked around, seeing Victor being led away in handcuffs by the police. "Because that man said something terrible would happen to you if I continued trying to expose the truth about the hospital. He showed me pictures of you playing in the backyard, times you went out with Grandma. He knew everything about our routine. So you sacrificed everything to protect me?" "I sacrificed everything because you are more important than anything else in the world," Isabel confirmed. "But every day, every minute of these 5 years, I planned how to come back and finish what I started." Henry respectfully approached the reunion. "Isabel, I need to apologize. If I had listened to your concerns back then—" "Mr. Davison," Isabel interrupted, "what matters is that you're doing the right thing now, and that my daughter found the allies she needed in you." Claire joined the group, carrying her laptop with all the evidence they had collected. "Isabel, The recording Sophia made today will ensure Victor pays for all his crimes, including forcing you into exile. And the hospital? Isabel asked, looking worriedly at the structure around them. It will be completely demolished and rebuilt to the correct standards, Claire replied. The State Board is already organizing a new bid, this time with strict supervision. One of the detectives approached the group. Ms. Isabel Miller, we need your testimony about the events that forced you to leave the city. Your testimony will be crucial for the case against Victor Morales. Of course, Isabel replied. But can I bring my daughter with me? I don't want to be separated from her for a moment. Certainly. And Mom, the investigation revealed that your family is entitled to significant compensation for the damages suffered. The state will reimburse all losses caused by the forced exile. 2 hours later, in a police station room, Isabel recounted in detail the last days she had spent in Harmony Creek 5 years earlier. How she had discovered the irregularities in the hospital, how she had tried to alert the competent authorities, and how Victor had used threats against Sophia to silence her. He showed me pictures of Sophia at school, in the park, even sleeping in her room, Isabel said, her voice trembling with contained anger. He said accidents happen to children every day, and it would be very easy to make it look like just bad luck. And then you decided to flee? The detective asked. I decided to hide temporarily while looking for a way to expose the truth without putting my daughter at risk, Isabel corrected. I changed my name to Sarah Miller, got a job in Willow Creek as a technical consultant, and spent those 5 years collecting additional evidence about fraud in public works. Sophia listened with fascination, finally understanding the complexity of the situation that had separated her family. Mom, what evidence did you collect? Isabel smiled at her daughter and opened a folder she had brought with her. I discovered that Victor didn't just defraud the City Children's Hospital in Harmony Creek. He did the same thing in at least 12 different cities in Texas. The revelation caused a stir in the room. What do you mean? Claire asked. He always used the same scheme. Won bids with seemingly honest proposals, started the works following the correct specifications, and then replaced materials with cheaper versions when no one was looking, Isabel explained. He saved millions on each project. And the other constructions? Are they all compromised? The detective asked with horror. 3 public schools, 2 health clinics, a daycare, and 6 residential buildings, Isabel listed, all with serious structural problems that could cause tragedies at any moment. Henry covered his face with his hands. My God, I was his partner. I could have prevented all this if I had paid attention. Mr. Davison, Isabel said gently, Victor was very skillful at hiding his activities. Even I, being a specialized engineer, took months to discover the full pattern of fraud. What will happen to all these constructions? Sophia asked, concerned about the people who could get hurt. They will be inspected immediately and evacuated if necessary, the detective replied. Your mother may have saved hundreds of lives with this information. When they left the police station, it was already night. Martha was waiting at the entrance, accompanied by Mrs. Carmen Rodriguez. The reunion between Isabel and her mother was equally emotional, marked by tears of relief and gratitude. My daughter, Martha said, hugging Isabel, I knew you would come back when it was safe. Thank you for taking such good care of Sophia, Mom, Isabel replied. She's become an extraordinary girl. She's always been extraordinary, Martha corrected. She just needed someone to help her use her intelligence in the right way. Mrs. Carmen Rodriguez, who had been instrumental in saving the day by alerting the authorities, was warmly thanked by the entire family. I just did what any neighbor would do, she said modestly. You saved our lives, Sophia said. If you hadn't called the police when you received my signal, don't think about it, my dear, Carmen said. The important thing is that you're all safe now. The next morning, the story of the brilliant girl who exposed a major fraud in public works was splashed across all the newspapers in Texas. Sophia woke up famous, but her only concern was whether she could finally live a normal life with her mother. Mom, she asked during breakfast at Martha's house, can we stay together forever now? Forever and a little more, Isabel promised, kissing her daughter's forehead. We'll never be separated again. And can I keep inventing things? Of course you can. In fact, I've already talked to Professor Thompson about getting a special scholarship for you. How about studying engineering at the university? Sophia's eyes gleamed with excitement. Really? A girl who builds functional drones at 9 years old can do anything, Isabel said proudly. Henry, who had joined the family for breakfast, made a proposal that surprised everyone. "Isabel, how about we work together again? This time with you as a partner in the company? Are you offering a partnership? I'm offering the chance to rebuild everything the right way, with strict supervision, top-quality materials, and most importantly, with the certainty that no child will ever again be at risk because of our constructions." Sophia observed the adults planning the future and felt, for the first time in years, completely safe and loved. Her journey had begun with a spontaneous act of heroism, saving a man falling from a building, and ended with the reunification of her family and the exposure of crimes that could have caused unimaginable tragedies. But most important of all, she had proven to herself that intelligence, when combined with courage and love, can overcome any obstacle, no matter how great. 3 weeks had passed since Victor's arrest, and Sophia's life was transforming in ways she had never imagined. The small house in Oakwood Heights had become a constant hub of activity, with journalists, lawyers, engineers, and even other young inventors coming to meet the girl who had exposed one of the biggest public works frauds in Texas history. That Monday morning, Sophia woke to the familiar sound of her mother preparing coffee in the kitchen. This sound, which she had lost at age 4 and rediscovered at age 9, was to her the sweetest melody in the world. She got up quickly and ran to the kitchen, where she found Isabel studying architectural blueprints spread across the table. "Good morning, my little engineer," Isabel said, kissing her daughter's forehead. "Did you sleep well?" "I did, Mom." "What are these drawings?" Sophia asked, observing the projects with curiosity. "These are the new designs for the Children's Hospital," Isabel explained. "This time, I'm personally supervising every step of the construction to ensure everything is done correctly." Sophia examined the drawings with experienced eyes, noticing details an ordinary child would never perceive. "Will this beam here support the weight of the medical equipment on the floor above?" Isabel smiled, impressed as always by her daughter's observational skills. "Yes, it will. I calculated it with a safety margin 3 times greater than necessary. What if there's an earthquake? Even with a moderate earthquake, the structure would remain stable," Isabel assured. "I learned from the errors of the previous project." Martha entered the kitchen at that moment, carrying a bag of groceries. At 78, she had much more energy since the family reunited. The weight of constant worry for Sophia and Isabel had finally lifted from her shoulders. "Good morning, my dears," she said, starting to put away the groceries. "Sophia, a letter arrived for you." "A letter for me?" Sophia asked, surprised. Few people knew her exact address. Martha handed her an official envelope with the State University of Texas seal. Sophia carefully opened it and read the contents aloud. "Dear Sophia Miller, it is with great pleasure that we inform you that you have been selected to participate in the special program for the development of young engineering talents. The program will allow you to attend special classes on Saturdays, participate in research projects, and have access to the university's laboratories." "Mum, is this true?" Isabel exchanged a knowing glance with Martha. "Professor Thompson worked hard to get this special approval. You'll be able to study even more advanced things." Sophia's eyes filled with joyful tears. "I'll be able to learn to make even better inventions to help people?" "You'll be able to learn anything you want," Isabel confirmed. At that moment, someone knocked on the door. It was Henry, accompanied by Claire, and a woman Sophia didn't know. "Good morning, Miller family," Henry greeted. "I brought some people who would like to meet our little heroine." The unknown woman introduced herself as Dr. Ann Benson, Director of the state's Department of Child and Adolescent Protection. "Sophia, I came here to talk about a very special situation." "What situation?" Sophia asked, always curious. "During the investigation into Victor Morales' crimes, we discovered there are other children in similar situations to yours," Dr. Ann explained. "Daughters of employees who discovered irregularities and were forced into silence through threats." Isabel frowned. "How many children?" 7 families identified so far," Dr. Ann replied. "All living in fear, some with vanished parents, others with family members too intimidated to report." Claire spoke up. "Sophia, Dr. Ann had an idea about how you could help these children." "How can I help?" Sophia immediately asked. "By creating a secure communication system," Dr. Ann explained. "Something that allows children in dangerous situations to ask for help without criminals noticing." Sophia's eyes lit up with the challenge. "A special emergency communication system for children?" "Exactly. You showed that it's possible to create sophisticated devices using simple materials. Imagine if we could teach other children to do the same thing. Sophia was already mentally elaborating possibilities. We can use old radios, broken cell phones, even electronic toys. And the best part, Henry added, is that the new company my partner and I are creating with your mother would provide all the necessary materials. It would be our first social project. Isabel observed her daughter's growing excitement. What do you think, Sophia? Would you like to help other children using your inventions? Of course, Sophia exclaimed. But I'll need a bigger lab. We've already taken care of that, Claire said with a smile. The university is preparing a special space for you to work on weekends. While the adults discussed logistical details, Sophia ran to her small lab in the back of the house and returned carrying a notebook full of drawings and notes. I've already had some ideas, she said, opening the notebook to show complex diagrams. An alarm system that looks like a common toy but can send emergency signals, and a type of secret code that children can use to ask for help without dangerous adults understanding. Dr. Ann examined the drawings with admiration. Sophia, these projects are brilliant. With some adaptations, they could save many lives. And there's more, Sophia continued, turning the pages. I thought about creating a communication network where children can help each other. If a child is in danger in one city, other children in different cities can alert the authorities. Henry shook his head in amazement. How do you think of these things? My mom always said that when we have a special talent, we should use it to help those in need, Sophia replied simply. Isabel felt her heart swell with pride. Even during the years of separation, her lessons had remained alive in her daughter's heart. So it's decided, Dr. Ann said. We're going to create the Sophia Project, an initiative to develop child protection technologies using accessible materials. Sophia Project? The girl repeated, surprised. In your honor, Claire explained. You've shown that age is no barrier to making a difference in the world. In the following days, the project's preparation consumed the attention of the entire family. The Oakwood Heights house transformed into a planning hub, with engineers, child psychologists, and security experts constantly coming and going. Sophia worked tirelessly on prototypes, always with Isabel by her side, offering technical and emotional guidance. It was the partnership they had both dreamed of during the years of separation, mother and daughter uniting their intelligences to create something greater than themselves. One afternoon, while testing a new communication device, Sophia asked a question that caught Isabel by surprise. Mom, are you afraid other bad people will try to hurt us again? Isabel paused her work and looked directly into her daughter's eyes. Yes, I am. But I've learned something important. Fear only paralyzes us if we let it control our decisions. And how do we not let fear control us? By continuing to do what's right, even when it's difficult, Isabel answered. And by keeping the people we love close, Sophia nodded thoughtfully. Is that why you came back, even knowing it could be dangerous? I came back because I found that living in fear and away from you was worse than facing any danger, Isabel confessed. And because I knew I had raised a daughter brave enough to protect herself. I wasn't alone, Sophia corrected. I had Grandma Martha, Mr. Davison, Professor Thompson, and I always had you here, she said, touching her heart. That night, the family received a call that brought news about Victor's trial. The lawyer informed them that, given the overwhelming amount of evidence collected by Sophia, Victor had decided to confess all crimes in exchange for a reduced sentence. How long will he be in jail? Sophia asked. At least 20 years, the lawyer replied, and he'll have to pay millions in restitution to all the affected families. What about the dangerous constructions? All will be demolished and rebuilt with strict supervision. The state also created new inspection laws to ensure this never happens again. When they hung up the phone, Sophia felt a strange sensation, a mixture of relief, satisfaction, and also a touch of sadness. The traumatic chapter of her life was finally closed, but that meant her extraordinary journey as a child confronting adult criminals had come to an end. Mom, she said, now that it's all over, can I just be a normal kid again? Isabel laughed softly. My dear, you were never a normal child, and that's a wonderful thing. But now you can be an exceptional child without having to worry about dangers. And can I keep inventing? You can invent anything you want. In fact, the world needs your inventions. Sophia smiled, feeling for the first time in years that she could simply be a 9-year-old girl with extraordinary talent, protected by her family's love, and free to use her intelligence to make the world a better place. 6 months had passed since the start of the Sophia project, and the results exceeded all expectations. The lab the university had prepared for the girl now buzzed with activity every Saturday, with children of various ages learning to build security devices using recycled materials. That Saturday morning, Sophia was teaching a group of 8 children, aged 6 to 12, how to turn an old radio into an emergency transmitter. Each of them had been identified by Dr. Ann Benson as being in difficult family situations, but nothing as extreme as what Sophia had experienced. "Remember," Sophia said with the patience of someone who had taught this lesson many times, "the secret is to make the device look broken on the outside. That way, no one will suspect you can ask for help." Luke, a 7-year-old boy whose father worked in civil construction and had begun to receive threats from corrupt supervisors, raised his hand. "Sophia, how do we know someone will hear us when we activate the transmitter?" "Good question, Luke," she replied, showing a map of the region fixed on the wall. "See these red dots? These are all the monitoring stations we've created. When you activate your transmitters, at least 3 of these stations will receive the signal." Maria, a 10-year-old girl, whose mother worked as an accountant and had discovered irregularities in a local company, asked another question. "What if we're far from all these stations?" "That's why we also created this mobile network," Sophia explained, showing a small device that looked like a common toy. "Any child who has one of these can serve as a repeater station, amplifying the emergency signal." Isabel, who was watching the class from a nearby table where she worked on new projects, smiled, seeing how her daughter had developed as a teacher. Sophia not only shared technical knowledge, but also transmitted courage and hope to children facing difficult situations. "Professor Sophia," Julia, an 8-year-old girl, said, "My older sister said it's no use reporting bad people because they always have more power than children." Sophia stopped fiddling with the wires and looked directly at Julia. "You know, Julia, I thought the same thing when I found out that bad people were trying to hurt my family." "And what changed?" Julia asked. "I discovered that when bad people do bad things, they always leave evidence, and when we gather a lot of small pieces of evidence, they turn into proof too big to be ignored." Luke spoke up again. "But weren't you scared?" "I was very scared," Sophia admitted honestly. "But my mom taught me that courage isn't not being afraid. Courage is doing the right thing even when you are afraid." At that moment, Claire entered the lab carrying a large box. "More donations have arrived," she announced, this time from an electronics company in Midville. The children gathered around the box as Claire opened it, revealing dozens of new electronic components, integrated circuits, sensors, long-lasting batteries, and even small processors. "With these materials, you'll be able to build even more sophisticated devices," Claire said. "Professor Thompson," Maria asked, "why are companies donating these things to us?" "Because your story has inspired a lot of people," Claire replied. "When people learned that children were learning to protect themselves and other people, they wanted to help." Henry arrived at the lab at that moment, accompanied by a surprise that left all the children speechless. It was Thomas Grant, a famous inventor who had created several security devices used by police across the country. "Hello, young inventors," Thomas said with a warm smile. "I came to meet the team that is revolutionizing child protection in the United States." The children were impressed, but it was Sophia who asked the first question. "Mr. Grant, is it true that you created the tracking system that the police use to find missing people?" "It's true," Thomas confirmed, "but I'm much more impressed with the systems you've created. Can I see some of the devices you've built?" For the next hour, the children proudly presented their inventions to Thomas. He examined each device with professional attention, asking technical questions and offering suggestions for improvement. "Impressive," he said finally. "In 20 years of my career, I've never seen such a young group with so much practical talent." "Mr. Grant," Sophia said, "can I ask a personal question?" "Of course. Did you start inventing things to protect yourself or to protect other people?" Thomas thought for a moment. "Actually, I started when I was just a few years older than you. My younger sister had disappeared, and the police took days to find her because they didn't have adequate technology. I decided I was going to create that technology." "And your sister was okay?" "She was, thanks to brave people who didn't give up looking for her," Thomas replied. just as you didn't give up fighting for justice. After Thomas's visit, the children worked with renewed enthusiasm on their projects. Sophia circulated among them, offering technical help and emotional encouragement, naturally assuming the leadership role that her intelligence and experience conferred upon her. "Sophia," Luke called during a break, "can I tell you something?" "Of course, Luke. My dad said that since I started coming here, he feels less worried. He knows that if something happens to me, I'll know how to ask for help." "That's great," Sophia replied. "But remember that the most important thing is that bad people know you are no longer defenseless. That usually makes them think twice before trying to hurt anyone." Maria joined the conversation. "My mom said the same thing. She told her bosses that I know how to report irregularities, and since then, they've stopped pressuring her to hide information." Isabel, who had overheard the conversation, approached the group. "Do you know what that means?" she asked. "What?" the children asked in unison. "It means you are already changing the world, even without realizing it." That afternoon, while tidying up the lab after activities ended, Sophia made a discovery that deeply moved her. Among the morning's donations, there was a letter specifically addressed to her. The letter was from a girl named Brenda, 11 years old, living in Springfield, Texas. Brenda wrote, "Dear Sophia, my name is Brenda, and I saw your story in the newspaper. I wanted to tell you that my dad works at a company that is building a new school in our city, and he thought there were some things wrong with the construction. He was afraid to say anything because the boss said he would fire anyone who asked questions. But when he heard your story, he decided to report it anyway. The school will now be built correctly, and hundreds of children will be safe because of you. Thank you for teaching me that children can also be brave." Sophia read the letter aloud to her mother, her voice trembling with emotion. "Mom?" A girl I don't even know said our story helped her dad have the courage to do the right thing. "My dear," Isabel said, hugging her daughter, "this is what happens when we use our intelligence and courage for good. We create waves of change that spread far beyond what we can see." "How many other Brendas are there across the United States?" Sophia asked. "Thousands, probably," Isabel replied, "and each of them now knows they can be brave too." As they left the university that afternoon, Sophia looked back and saw the lab where so many children had learned not only to build protective devices, but also to believe in their own ability to make a difference. "Mom," she said, "I think I finally understood why you always said I was special." "Why?" "Because being special isn't just about being smarter than other people. It's about using that intelligence to help others be special too." Isabel smiled, knowing that her daughter had understood the most important lesson of all, that the true power of a genius is not in what they can create alone, but in what they can inspire others to create together. That night, as Sophia fell asleep in her bed in the Oakwood Heights house, now renovated with the restitution money, she thought of the dozens of children who were, at that very moment, building protective devices in their own homes, spread throughout the state. Her journey had begun with the simple desire to save a man falling from a building. Now it had transformed into a movement that was changing the way children across the country dealt with dangerous situations. And that was just the beginning. A year had passed since that fateful day, when Sophia Miller, at 9 years old, saved a man falling from a building using a drone made of scrap. Now, at 15, she walked through the halls of the State University of Texas, not as an exceptional visitor, but as the youngest student ever accepted into the institution's engineering program. It was a Tuesday morning in December, the eve of summer vacation, and Sophia was organizing the final details for a ceremony that would mark a historic moment, the inauguration of the 1,000th Sophia Project Laboratory in the United States. The program had expanded exponentially, reaching all states and even neighboring countries like Mexico and Canada. Professor Miller, Michael, one of her 12-year-old mentees, called, "Have the international transmission equipment arrived?" "Yes, Michael, they have," she replied, checking a list on her tablet. "Today we'll have children watching the ceremony from 17 different countries." Sophia's transformation over the years had been remarkable. Although she retained the same brilliant intelligence and compassion that characterized her since childhood, she now also possessed the confidence and leadership of someone who had changed the world before turning 20. "Sophia," Isabel said, entering the main lab that now occupied an entire floor of the university, "your grandmother called. She said the international press has already started arriving at the house." "International press?" Sophia asked, surprised. Apparently, the story of the American girl who created a global child protection movement drew interest from journalists in Europe and the United States, Isabel explained, now technical director of the national program. Henry arrived at that moment, carrying a commemorative plaque. At 58, he had completely transformed since the day he almost lost his life because of Victor's greed. His company, now in partnership with Isabel, had become a national reference in safe and socially responsible construction. "Sophia, I brought the plaque that will inaugurate the 1000th lab," he said, showing the golden metal piece. "Want to see the inscription?" Sophia read aloud, "Sophia Miller Laboratory Number 1000, in honor of the girl who proved that age is no barrier to changing the world. May every child who enters here remember, you too can make a difference." "It's perfect," she said, emotional. Dr. Ann Benson arrived accompanied by a delegation of national and international authorities. The Sophia Project had become a case study in universities worldwide, and representatives from various international organizations had come to personally meet the young woman who had revolutionized child protection. "Sophia," Dr. Ann said, "I'd like to introduce Ms. Marie Dubois from UNICEF and Mr. James Richardson from UNESCO." "It's an honor to meet you," Sophia said, greeting the visitors. "The honor is ours," Marie Dubois replied. "The work you've developed here is being implemented in 43 countries. We've never seen a child protection project with such a broad and effective impact." "And it all started when you were just 9 years old?" James Richardson asked. "Actually, it all started when I wanted to help someone in danger," Sophia corrected. "Age was never the most important factor." The inauguration ceremony took place in the university's central courtyard, live-streamed to the 1,000 labs spread across the United States and other countries. Sophia watched the screens showing children of all ages, in places as distant as the Amazon basin and schools in Buenos Aires, all connected by the same goal, learning to protect themselves and other people. "When I started this project," Sophia said into the microphone, "I was just a scared girl trying to protect my family. Today, we are a network of over 50,000 children in 5 continents, all capable of protecting themselves and others." She paused, observing the attentive faces in the audience and on the transmission screens. "But the most important thing we learned was not how to build protective devices. It was that when we unite around a noble goal, we can accomplish things that seem impossible." In the audience, Martha, now 83 but still vibrant and proud, wiped tears from her eyes. Beside her, Claire, who had become the program's pedagogical director, smiled with the satisfaction of someone who had witnessed one of the greatest educational transformations in history. "5 years ago," Sophia continued, "a bad man tried to silence my mother because she had discovered he was building a dangerous hospital for children. Today, that same hospital, correctly rebuilt, has served over 20,000 children with total safety." The audience applauded, but Sophia raised her hand for silence. "And there's one special person I want to thank publicly today." On the transmission screens, the image of a classroom in a penitentiary appeared. There was Victor Morales, now with graying hair and an expression very different from the arrogance he had shown years ago. "Mr. Morales," Sophia said, addressing the camera directly, "I know you're watching us, and I want to thank you." A murmur of surprise ran through the audience. No one expected Sophia to mention her former persecutor. "Thank me?" Victor asked through the video connection, visibly confused. "Yes. If you hadn't tried to harm my family, I never would have discovered that I could use my intelligence to protect other people. Your bad actions ended up creating something very good." Victor was silent for a long moment. In his 5 years in prison, he had had plenty of time to reflect on his choices. "Sophia, I wanted to apologize for everything I did to your family, for all the families I harmed." "Your apologies are accepted," Sophia said simply. "And I want you to know that when you leave prison, there will be a place for you in our rehabilitation program through social construction work." The generosity of the response shocked even the adults present. Sophia had not only transformed her own pain into purpose, but was offering redemption even to those who had tried to destroy her family. After the official ceremony, the family reunited at the Oakwood Heights house, now expanded and transformed into the Sophia Project's International Documentation Center. Children from various parts of the world sent their inventions to be displayed there, creating a living museum of childhood creativity applied to social protection. "Sophia," Isabel said as they walked through the garden that had replaced the old improvised lab. Sometimes I still can't believe everything that's happened. Me neither, Sophia admitted. But I think that was always the secret. We never stopped to think if it was impossible. We just did what needed to be done. And now? What are your plans for the future? Sophia smiled, the same determined smile she had at 9 when building scrap devices. Finish college, get a master's and doctorate, and then expand the project to all countries worldwide. I also want to create technologies that help not only children but the elderly, people with disabilities, anyone who needs protection. And a personal life? Friends, dating, normal teenage stuff? Mom, I have 50,000 friends spread all over the world, Sophia laughed. And as for dating, well, I haven't found anyone who loves electronics as much as I do yet. That night, during the celebration dinner, a special call came that moved the entire family. It was from the Nobel Prize Committee, informing them that Sophia had been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for the Sophia Project's impact on reducing violence against children on a global scale. At 15, Sophia asked, incredulous. The committee said that age is not an exclusion criterion when the impact is demonstrably transformative, the representative explained on the phone. After hanging up, the family was silent for a few moments, processing the magnitude of that information. Sophia, Martha said finally, remember when you were little and I used to say you were special? I remember, Grandma. I never imagined how special you really were. Later, when everyone had gone to sleep, Sophia went out to the backyard of the house where it all began. She looked up, seeing the stars shining in the Harmony Creek sky, and thought of all the children who at that moment were sleeping safely because they had small protective devices created by their own hands hidden in their rooms. She thought of the hospital that now saved lives instead of threatening them, of the dozens of constructions that had been renovated or rebuilt after reports from children participating in the project, and especially of the thousands of families who had been reunited because brave children had learned to report dangerous situations. Thank you, she whispered to the stars, addressing no one in particular, perhaps fate, perhaps the parents she never knew, perhaps simply the universe that had conspired to transform a scared girl into a force for global change. When she returned inside the house, Sophia passed by her old improvised lab, now preserved exactly as it was on the day everything began. On the wall, her first drawing of a rescue drone, made with colored pencil on a piece of cardboard, was still tacked up. Next to the drawing, there was a photo of her at 9, holding her first functional device, with a shy but determined smile. And just below, a phrase she had recently written, "Every great scientist started as a child asking questions. The difference is that some of us never stop asking." That dawn, as Harmony Creek slept peacefully, Sophia Miller fell asleep knowing she had fulfilled the promise she had made to herself years ago, to use her intelligence to protect innocent people. But more than that, she had proven that a single brave child can literally change the world. And in labs spread across 5 continents, other brave children continued inventing, protecting, and transforming their communities, carrying on the legacy of an American girl who one day saved a man falling from the sky and, unknowingly, ended up saving thousands of other lives in the process. The future had never seemed so bright for the children of the world. And all because a 9-year-old girl decided that her intelligence should be used to protect, not just to impress. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story by giving it a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.